If you've ever had to choose between honor and family, leave a comment, hit like, share this story, and follow the channel so you don't miss what's next. I'm Samantha, 32, an internal communications manager at a software company in Boulder, Colorado. As the oldest daughter in a family that always put reputation above truth, I used to think I knew how to keep everything balanced. Until that afternoon, when a blunt text from my mother made every idea I had about family go sideways. "We changed the locks, don't come back." I stood frozen in the airport parking lot, phone in hand, early spring rain smearing my mascara all the way down to my chin, and I didn't bother wiping it off. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt, just hollow, like someone had drained every drop of blood out of me. The Uber pulled up. I loaded my suitcase without a word. I didn't dare speak, afraid I'd scream in the middle of strangers. That house on Cedar Street, I thought it was my place to return to. The only thing my grandmother ever left me, after a quiet life of hand-woven baskets and peppermint tea. It was also where I'd poured every bit of savings into restoring each cracked window pane, each brick. And now? Tossed out like a tenant overstaying her welcome. When the car stopped in front of the gate, I still held on to some fragile hope that maybe they were bluffing. But the shiny new lock said otherwise the moment I touched it. I twisted the key. Nothing. A soft click. Like someone laughing from behind the door. I stepped back, looked up at the second-floor window, curtains drawn. Dad's car still parked on the curb next to the old oak tree where Grandma used to hang wind chimes every summer. I called Mom, no answer. Called Dad, straight to voicemail. Then another text from her. "Don't make trouble, Sam, this is for everyone's good." Everyone's good? Who was I in that equation? A leftover piece? I rolled my suitcase toward the porch, sat down on the weathered step, back leaning against the wooden wall where Grandma used to sit with her tea and morning paper. The rain kept falling, but it wasn't gentle anymore, just cold. I fumbled with my phone, hands shaking so badly I typed the wrong passcode twice, finally managed to send a message. "They lock me out. Don't know where my stuff is. Don't know what to do, Leah." She replied with just 2 words. "On my way." I rested the phone in my lap, eyes locked on that new silver lock. Cold. Final. Like a quiet period at the end of a sentence no one finished. Footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. Maybe it was them, maybe a neighbor. Whoever it was. I didn't have the energy to explain. I just sat there, grip tightening on the suitcase handle, gaze pushing through the closed door, trying to hold on to the sound of Grandma laughing when I burned the pie crust, the scent of lavender on old tablecloths, the memory of curling up inside the pantry when my parents fought hard enough to break dishes. But memories don't open locks, and I had already been pushed out, not with yelling, but with silence. That's when I saw it, a black trash bag tucked under the back porch. I jumped to my feet, tripped on the slick wooden step. Didn't care. That bag was mine. I didn't realize that was only the beginning. The black trash bag under the rear awning was definitely mine. I opened it with numb hands, head still spinning. A faded sweater, old running shoes, a cracked serum bottle, nothing worth money, except the shattered picture frame with the photo of Grandma and me on her 80th birthday. Her hair completely white, eyes squinting as I sang the wrong lyrics. I didn't cry. I just sat back down and held the broken frame tightly, breathing slowly. Then my phone buzzed. Leah had arrived. She stepped out of her red Civic, expression blank, eyes scanning the rain-soaked yard. "Get in," she said, voice low but steady. I didn't ask where we were going. I quietly loaded the bag into the trunk and climbed into the passenger seat. That afternoon the rain got heavier. The windows fogged up, and Leah handed me a tissue without saying a word. She always knew when to be silent. I hated depending on anyone, but right then, it felt like a relief not to pretend I was fine. A few weeks later, I was in a small office on the 3rd floor of Jackson & Cole Law in Old Town Sacramento. Everything in that room felt too neat, too polished, compared to what I was about to unpack. The attorney was Mrs. Delaney, a black woman around 60, hair braided into a tidy bun, silver chain glasses. She handed me a copy of my grandmother Eleanor Whitman's will, along with a thick, red wax-sealed envelope. She made it very clear, "You are to receive the original if a dispute arises," Mrs. Delaney said, eyes watching me carefully. I nodded, hands steady but my chest heavy. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on soft, floral-edged paper, with a slightly right-leaning script. I recognized it immediately. It was the same style Grandma used for holiday cards and recipe notes. "Dear Sam, if you're reading this, things have clearly gone off course. The house on Cedar isn't just real estate, it's memory. It's the anchor in a family that's cracked in too many places. You're the only one who ever asked about the crack in the windowsill or the scorch mark by the old gas stove. You listened. You saw what it was. No one else ever tried." I paused, eyes stinging like someone had rubbed salt across them. Leah sat beside me, her hand gently resting on my knee. I kept reading. "If your parents object, stay calm. They'll do what they always do, demand, then deny. But you're not alone. This letter, the will, and the witnesses are all legal. Step by step, you'll get where you need to be." I folded the letter carefully. No shaking. No words needed. Mrs. Delaney slid over a thin folder. "Your parents contacted us last year. They inquired about dividing the estate." Mrs. Eleanor updated her will shortly after and recorded a formal statement. I looked up. "A recording?" She nodded. "We have a copy, just in case." I stood, thanked her, and walked out to the glass-lined hallway. Cars moved below like nothing had changed. I didn't need the world to understand. Just one person had, and she'd left proof that her trust in me wasn't blind. But that night, back at Leah's, an unfamiliar email popped up in my inbox. Subject line: "About Eleanor. I know what your family tried to hide." I reread the email 3 times that night, sitting on Leah's wooden kitchen chair, next to the hum of the toaster oven. The sender's name was Margaret Hensley, a name I'd only heard Grandma mention once in passing, back in middle school. "Aunt Margaret on my mother's side," she'd said, then changed the subject. Grandma didn't talk much about extended family, but there'd been something in her tone when she said that name, like dust on an old photo you don't want to wipe off. The email said just one thing. I held on to what she left behind in case this day ever came. "If you're ready, call me." Beneath it was a landline with a North California mountain area code. I didn't call right away, just saved the number, turned off the screen, and stared out the kitchen window. The rain had stopped, but the gutters still dripped, like a clock counting down from something I hadn't seen coming. 2 days later, I returned to the old house on Cedar early in the morning, not to confront anyone, just to see clearly what they'd taken, and if anything had been left behind. Whew. Leah came with me, silent as I slid the key into the garden gate's rusted lock, which hadn't yet been replaced. Inside, the rosemary bushes were half dead, and Grandma's lavender patch was now just bare stems. As I passed the back porch, I saw it, the small wooden shelf my grandmother used for the mailbox. It was lying on its side against the wall, the paint peeling, one leg broken, like someone had kicked it out of the way. "You okay?" Leah asked, holding a to-go coffee cup. I didn't answer. I just sat next to the fallen shelf and pulled out a scrap of paper wedged beneath it. An old water bill from last year, my name still clearly printed. I had paid every single bill since moving in. No one helped. No one split the costs. But I'd never asked them to. Then Leah handed me an old envelope she'd found near the pile of trash bags that day. I opened it. It was a draft of last year's Christmas invitation. My tone, neatly typed, still included a section for my mother. "Mom, if you'd like to come, your seat is still saved like every year. The pecan pie will be baked just the way you like." I folded the letter, gently tucked it into my coat pocket. Sometimes, People don't shove you out with a scream, they just refuse to see you. Quietly, long enough. That night I called the number from the email. An older woman's voice answered, clear, sharp, not a single wasted second. Margaret Hensley speaking. This is Samantha Whitman. Eleanor was my grandmother. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't her next sentence. I know, she told me, if the whole family turned on you, that's when I needed to step in. Her voice wasn't soft, but there was something in the way she said, you, like I wasn't a stranger. I have Eleanor's letter, and a recording. I gripped the hem of my shirt. Where should we meet? My house. Dunsmuir, near Shasta Pass. The sooner the better. That trip, I didn't know what it would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back. I left Sacramento at 6 a.m., with a thermos of hot coffee Leah packed, and a small canvas bag holding the important documents. Copy of the will, Eleanor's handwritten letter, old utility bills. The road to Dunsmuir was longer than I remembered, but the early light spilling through the pine trees made it feel less heavy. Margaret's house was at the end of a dirt road, beside a grove of fir trees, almost 5 miles from the main town. A gray house with a faded red metal roof, no house number. When I parked, she was already on the porch, arms crossed, frame thin but upright like a broomstick. Come in, this morning's wind is dry and mean, she said, then turned without waiting for me. The house smelled of cinnamon, old wood, and roasted coffee. No TV, no radio, just the hiss of the kettle on the gas stove. Margaret pulled out a drawer behind a bookshelf and retrieved a wax-sealed envelope. Next to it was a small blue USB drive labeled in marker, in case of everything. She placed both on the table in front of me, without a word. I looked at her, trying to find something familiar, but her face was granite cold. I don't need to know what happened between you and your parents, she said, but Eleanor trusted you. That's enough. I nodded, unsure I could speak without my voice cracking. I opened the envelope first. 3 handwritten pages, the ink still bold, the letters slanted just like her recipe cards. Samantha, if you're reading this, things probably didn't go as I hoped. Your parents tried to sell the house while I was alive. They offered to move me into a senior facility in Redding, easier to manage, assets. I refused, and was labeled stubborn. They thought I was confused. But you know the truth, don't you? I was clear when I wrote that will. I was clear when you asked about every crack in the ceiling. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the letter like it might fly away. That house isn't a prize. It's what's left of decency in this family, and I want you to keep it. Because you chose to sit with me instead of going out to play. Don't let them erase that. I folded the letter, avoiding Margaret's eyes. She was standing by the window, hands clasped. I plugged in the USB. A recording started. My grandmother's voice. Slow, but steady. This is Eleanor Whitman. I'm not coerced. I'm not confused. I'm choosing to leave the house to my granddaughter Samantha because I believe she'll take care of it. If anyone says otherwise, let them hear me say it. A pause. Then my mother's voice. Sharp, irritated. Don't you see what Dad and I went through with that house? You mean trying to sell it, my grandmother replied, her voice dry as gravel. Samantha's the only one who cared to keep it. I hit pause, couldn't hear another word. Now you know, Margaret said, still facing the window. They're not mad about the house. They're mad they thought they were in control. I packed the letter and USB away. Thank you, really. She only nodded. Don't thank me, just finish what you started. On the way back, I didn't feel angry, just clear about who stood with me and who didn't. And then, just as I walked through the door, my phone rang. A strange number from Sacramento County. I answered. We're calling from the legal office representing Mr. and Mrs. Richard and Nancy Whitman, your parents. They've just filed a formal contest regarding Eleanor's mental capacity at the time the will was made. I sat on the edge of the bed gripping the phone. So, they had made their move, and this time they weren't pretending to keep things quiet. I met Ryan at a coffee shop behind the old bookstore in Midtown. Our old hideout when we used to sneak out during family fights to play Uno. The smell of old paper and fresh croissants always made things feel a bit lighter. Or at least like they could be. Ryan was sitting by the window, stirring his latte. Morning sun glinted off his glasses. He looked thinner, his hair cropped short. Still wearing that worn gray hoodie we both used to share like armor. "I heard about the contest," he said softly. No greeting, no apology. I sat across from him, taking off my sunglasses. "And what do you think?" Ryan shook his head, not meeting my eyes. "I'm not part of it. I didn't sign anything." "But you knew," I said evenly. "And you stayed silent." He pressed his lips together. Finally he said, "If you give up the house, this ends faster." I laughed. Not loud, just one dry, wind-scraped sound. "You're saying I should surrender my grandmother's legacy to keep peace?" Ryan didn't answer. His spoon froze in the cup. I saw the same thin, pale wrist I used to pull into the backyard when our parents fought too loudly. I leaned in. "I didn't expect you to fight for me. I just didn't think you'd bow this low." "I'm not bowing," he said, meeting my eyes for the first time. They were red. "I'm exhausted." I lowered my voice. "So am I, Ryan. But I'm not running." We sat in silence for nearly a minute. The espresso machine hissed. The kid giggled behind us after getting extra candy. Finally Ryan stood. "Either way, I'm not the one you should worry about. They're playing harder than you think." He left the unpaid bill on the table and walked out before I could stop him. That afternoon, I brought a structural engineer to the house to inspect the foundation and plumbing. First steps toward planning a renovation. I had the old blueprints my grandmother kept, wrapped in oil paper, and beside them, a checklist of changes I wanted to make. Rebuild the kitchen, replace the roof, preserve the brick fireplace. Not too modern, just enough to keep this place true to the spirit she left behind. But the moment I parked at the gate, I knew something was wrong. My father's black SUV was there, parked right in front of the porch. The car door was open. He stood there, arms crossed, like he'd been waiting all morning. I stepped out, holding the blueprint tightly against my side. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not moving any closer. "You're not allowed to tear this place apart," he said, his voice flat. "I'm not tearing it down. I'm renovating. Under legal ownership." He took a step forward, his shadow covering part of the walkway. "You're not worthy." I let out a quiet laugh. If she were still alive, what would she think hearing you call her senile in court? His face tightened, then relaxed again. "We're not letting everything fall into your hands. It won't be that easy." I stepped back half a foot. "Then I guess I should prepare for something harder." That night, I got an email from a development company in Oakland, an offer to buy the house for $1.3 million. Only one person in the family ever knew I used that email address, and I knew exactly who had sold out that private detail. I shut the laptop, didn't lock it, didn't delete it. I just sat there, staring at the black screen, thinking, looked like they're willing to go further than I thought. The next afternoon, I got a call from the Sacramento County Police. The officer's voice was polite but distant. "Is this Samantha Whitman? We need to clarify a few details regarding a report of stolen property filed by Mr. Richard and Mrs. Nancy Whitman." I nearly dropped my phone. I said I stole something? Antique jewelry, legal documents, a wooden box of historical value. He paused. "They believe you took items that don't belong to you." I leaned against the wall, palms sweating even with the A/C running. "Those things belong to my grandmother. She left them to me. We're only conducting preliminary verification at this stage. No action has been taken. But if you have proof of ownership, we advise you to prepare it." I nodded out of habit, knowing he couldn't see me. "I have proof," I said. After the call, I sat frozen on the kitchen floor, back against the fridge, arms wrapped around my knees. Leia sat down beside me, said nothing, just handed me a glass of water. I had never seen my parents play dirty like this. Every move they made felt calculated, like they'd rehearsed the plan for months, just waiting for me to fight back so they could retaliate. The next morning, I brought all the documents to the office of the attorney I had hired. Amber Doyle, well known for handling high-stakes family property disputes. Amber was in her early 40s with short black hair, a clipped voice, and sharp gray eyes that saw right through anything you tried to hide. Her office was on the third floor of a red brick building in downtown San Jose, right next to an old bookstore and a Cuban meat pie shop. I told her everything, every text message, every item left outside in a trash bag, the USB with my grandmother's voice, the letter Margaret gave me, even the police call from the morning before. Amber didn't interrupt, she just wrote notes and nodded when it mattered. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "We're going on the offensive. I don't want to drag this out," I said, tired. "I just want my house back and some peace." Amber shook her head. "They've crossed a line, Samantha. This isn't personal anymore. This is legal abuse and defamation." She rested her hand on the folder, eyes steely. "I'll file an emergency motion to restore your access to the property, and we're countersuing for unlawful eviction." I tightened my grip on the bag strap. "And the theft accusation? That's going to backfire. We'll request an investigation into the false report. Every document you have, every recording, it's enough to prove their intent." I nodded slowly. Amber gave my hand a light tap. "You're not alone in this. If you've ever been silenced because no one believed you, or blamed just because you dared to speak the truth, leave a comment. Share this story if you believe someone out there needs to hear it. Sometimes, it only takes one person to stand up, and if that person is you, don't back down." 3 days later, I got a court notice. Amber's emergency motion had been approved, and a preliminary hearing was set for the following week. I printed a copy of the notice and pinned it beside the old wooden clock my grandmother once hung. Not to remind myself I was winning, just to remember, this time, I wasn't running. That same evening, I got an email from a strange address. Margaret Olden, 11 at 948 at subject. "About Eleanor, there's something you don't know." I opened it. After reading the first line, my hand froze on the mouse. "Samantha, I'm your grandmother Eleanor's maternal half-sister, and I have something she left behind, for you only, if the family turned against you." I set my cup of tea down. The clink on the table sounded like a distant signal echoing back. Everything was clearer than ever, but also messier than I could have imagined. I still didn't know what waited at the end of this road, but I was sure of one thing: this wasn't the end. I called Margaret the next morning. Her voice hadn't changed, still direct, not a word wasted. "Can you come today?" "Yes," I said, even though I hadn't eaten and my head was still buzzing from a sleepless night. At 11 a.m., Dunsmuir was scorching hot, but the road to Margaret's house stayed cool thanks to the tall pines lining both sides. The house was as quiet as last time, except this time, she was already on the porch, holding a heavy, dark wooden box. "She left this," she said, placing the box on the wooden table in the living room, "and said to only hand it over if exactly what's happening now came true." I sat down, running my fingers across the worn surface. A small brass plate on the lid read, "For the one who saw the cracks." I opened it. Inside was a long letter, a stack of color-printed documents, and an old photo of 3 women standing in a garden. My grandmother Eleanor, a woman I assumed was Margaret, and a little girl in a white dress. My mother Nancy. I picked up the letter. Black ink, slanted script. My grandmother's unmistakable handwriting. "Samantha, if you're reading this, then everything happened just as I feared. Your parents had plans to sell the house before I was even gone. I knew it because I once overheard them talking to a broker named Russell Boone from NorCal Development. They had signed a memorandum of understanding, promising to hand over the property after clearing the mess. I gripped the page tightly, eyes locked on every word. She kept copies of the emails along with the preliminary contract, in the folder beneath this letter. She also recorded a conversation between her and my parents in the kitchen the day of the argument. That recording is saved on the blue USB drive I got from Margaret. I leaned down and picked up the folder. The first page was an email from my mother to Boone. The house will be vacant in June. We agreed on $1.35 million. The date was clear, 3 weeks before my grandmother passed. Margaret poured tea, her hands steady. Eleanor didn't want a legal fight, but she wasn't naive either. I nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. I packed everything carefully into my bag and stood. Before leaving, I turned back to look at her. "Do you believe I'll win?" She smirked. She did. I'm just delivering it to the right person. I drove straight back to San Jose, my mind running like a machine, not just because of the evidence I held, but because, for the first time, I could feel it. I wasn't walking this path alone anymore. Amber looked through everything without a word for nearly 10 minutes. When she closed the folder, she said just one thing. "You just brought the checkmate to their dirty game." She opened her laptop and plugged in the USB. I heard my grandmother's voice, clear, calm, alongside my parents', trying to belittle her, persuade her, then intimidate her. Amber looked at me. "I'll file all of this with the amended claim. They won't see this coming." I nodded, my breath slowing for the first time in weeks. Just as I was getting ready to leave her office, my phone lit up. A new email, this time from NorCal Development. The subject line was simple. About the pending agreement. Ownership verification. I didn't flinch, I just saw it for what it was. They were starting to feel fear. And I knew the public battle was about to begin. Monday. Light fog. The smell of fresh asphalt from construction down the block, mixed with the scent of cinnamon waffles from the cafe across the street. I stood in front of house number 17 on Cedar Street, holding a copy of the court's property access order. Leah was beside me, holding a canvas bag with a new padlock and a small wooden sign. A county officer named Hutchinson accompanied us for the court-ordered re-entry. He looked about 50, with tan skin, direct eyes, and a low, steady voice. "You ready?" I nodded. The front door wasn't locked, but the old lock showed signs of being removed. I opened the door with a new key and stepped into the house I had once been pushed out of with a single cold text. No one was inside. Not much furniture left. The lavender painting my grandmother loved was gone. The teacup set, too. The floor had dragging marks, like someone had hauled things out overnight. I walked toward the small room on the left, where my grandmother used to keep her sewing machine and rolls of colored yarn. The room was empty now, but on the wooden table something remained. A silver-toned metal hair clip, tarnished. I picked it up. It was so light it barely had weight. She used to wear it every morning to twist her hair up before tending the garden. Leah stood quietly behind me. "Anything?" "There used to be," I said. We spent the whole morning cataloging what was left. I took notes on everything missing, snapped photos of every room. When I passed the kitchen, I stopped at the gas oven. I remembered, one afternoon when I was 12, she taught me how to bake an apple pie. I burned the crust. She laughed and said, "A little burnt is good, just like people. The flaws make you memorable." I ran my hand across the surface. No one had touched the thin layer of dust on the stove. Everything was just as I had left it. That afternoon, Leah helped me hang the small sign by the front door. "Private residence, not for sale, no agents." I also taped a handwritten notice on the front window. "Anyone trespassing on this property will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." That evening, as golden light stretched across the backyard, I sat alone in the living room, on the one armchair left behind. I brought a small speaker and played an old jazz track, something my grandmother used to put on every Sunday morning. No celebration, no wine, no cake, just the kind of quiet that isn't interrupted by fear. I knew there was still a stretch ahead, court, face-to-face, proving every detail before a judge. But right now, I had back the most important thing. A door that no longer locked me out. And no one had the right to push me out again. I turned on the porch light. Looking out at the backyard where she once grew mint, I whispered softly, "I'm home, Grandma." I sat there into the night, then suddenly remembered. Tomorrow morning I had to submit an extra copy of the NorCal contract along with the letters from Margaret. I stood up, walked toward the temporary home office, and switched on the desk lamp. Just as my fingers touched the folder, my phone buzzed. "Artie, a message from Ryan. Can we meet? I need to tell you something. About Mom." I stared at the screen, then sat back down. I didn't know what was coming, but I had a feeling it wasn't small. I met Ryan at Pioneer Park, the place where Grandma once took us to an outdoor concert. The old stone benches were still there, moss crawling up the legs, sparrows circling the low branches. Ryan wore a light jacket, hands in his pockets, eyes on the still lake that reflected the pine trees perfectly. I sat beside him, not too close, enough space to let him choose how much to say. "Mom is sick," he said, still not looking at me. Not serious, but enough that she's starting to get scared. I didn't respond right away. The breeze tugged at my sleeve. "You telling me this hoping I'll forgive her?" Ryan shook his head. "I don't know. I just thought. You should know." I clenched my hands, my nails pressing into my palms. "What about the other day? The theft accusations, the forged paperwork, selling the house behind my back?" "You were right," Ryan murmured. "They didn't expect you to keep proof. When your law firm filed the counterclaim, Mom nearly collapsed that night. But instead of owning up, she just blamed everyone else." I looked over, for the first time in months. Ryan's face was gaunt, the skin under his eyes gray like he hadn't slept in days. He used to be the kid I hid candy for under his pillow, the one I carried across a ditch when his shoe slipped off. "I used to think you were too harsh," Ryan said, voice steady but low. "But now I get it. You didn't have a choice." I didn't nod or shake my head, I just exhaled. "Not everyone gets the luxury of choice, Ryan." We sat quietly a little longer. As we stood, Ryan pulled a small, plastic-covered photo from his jacket pocket, the edges worn. "I found this when cleaning out old stuff at the house," he said, handing it to me. "It was in a metal box in one of Mom's drawers." I took it. It was a photo of my grandmother, Eleanor, standing in the garden holding a pot of purple lavender, smiling with her head tilted toward the camera. A handwritten message in ink below read, "Don't forget to care for this place, Sam." I held the photo tight. My chest ached, not from sorrow, but from knowing I was right to hold on to what others saw as just trouble. "Thank you," I said, adding nothing more. Ryan just nodded and turned away. That evening, I rehung the photo on the living room wall, right next to the fireplace. Leah came by with a box of homemade apple pie and a fresh bundle of lavender cut from her backyard. "This place is starting to feel like a home," she said, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Not just a home," I replied. "It's where she kept herself the most intact." We sat and ate pie under warm yellow light, not saying much, not needing to explain anything. I knew there was one more step, and it wouldn't be a quiet one. It was the day I had to go to court, and I wouldn't be walking in alone. The hearing was held at the Santa Clara County Courthouse on a crisp Tuesday morning in early fall. The sun was just bright enough to keep people from getting irritable while waiting in line at the security checkpoint. I arrived 20 minutes early, wearing a dark blue blazer dress, hair tied neatly, no heavy makeup. Amber told me, "Don't try to be strong, just be honest. I'll take care of everything else." My parents sat on the other side, alongside their attorney. My mother wore a beige sweater, clutching her purse like it was the last thing she could still control. My father stared straight ahead, never once meeting my eyes. The judge was Leslie Chu, a middle-aged Asian woman with sharp eyes and a voice that wasn't loud, but made the whole courtroom fall silent when she spoke. "Today we will examine the evidence regarding the legal ownership of the property at 17 Cedar Street, along with claims of unlawful eviction and criminal defamation." Amber presented first. She opened with a simple sentence. "Your Honor, all evidence shows that my client, Miss Samantha Whitman, is not only the legal heir according to the notarized will, but also the only person who upheld the wishes of the deceased by preserving the home as it was intended. She submitted the will, the handwritten letter, the USB with my grandmother's voice recording, the emails between my parents and NorCal Development, and photos of the damaged property. The room shifted when my grandmother's voice echoed through the courtroom. I, Eleanor Whitman, am fully sound of mind. My mother lowered her head. My father closed his eyes for a full 2 minutes and said nothing. As predicted, their attorney tried to question my grandmother's mental capacity, but Amber simply played the kitchen argument recording, ending with my grandmother's voice, calm, unmistakably lucid. If you can't respect me while I'm alive, then don't take what I leave to the only one who truly valued it. No one said anything after that. During the recess, Ryan approached. No suit, just a wrinkled dress shirt and khakis. He handed me a sheet of paper, a signed witness statement. I sent this to your attorney last night. I wrote that Grandma was fully aware. I was there when Mom tried to call the realtor to sell the house. I took the paper and nodded slightly. Nothing else needed to be said. He had chosen the right side. And this time, that was enough. When the judge announced the final decision, I just gripped the edge of my jacket. The house was returned to me, fully, with no conditions. My parents were ordered to cover legal fees and were prohibited from approaching the property within 100 feet without written permission. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I simply stepped out of the courtroom and placed my hand over my chest, where I had tucked the photo of Eleanor inside the lining of my blazer. I returned to the Cedar Street house that afternoon. I rehung her picture in the living room, replaced the light bulbs, opened the windows. And that weekend, I hosted a small photo exhibition, a space for young people to print phone photos and hang them on the old brick wall where she used to lean every evening. I didn't need a crowd, I just needed it to exist. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe your car, right before bed, or during a day when you needed a story to help you stand back up. Let me know where you're listening from. And if you want to hear more real journeys like this, don't forget to follow the channel because the next story might be exactly what you need. Thank you for staying until the very end. Because sometimes, just one person who understands is already enough. Samantha's story wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about standing for her worth when her own family tried to erase it. In real life, many are dismissed, ignored, simply for choosing to live by conscience instead of family expectations. But like Samantha, those who hold on to quiet strength and decency don't just protect an inheritance, they preserve something far greater. Their dignity and peace. And that is the deepest kind of victory.